There you go. Sorry for making you so dizzy. Inflation is exploding. Fed rug pull on rates. Countdown for silver is here. Inflation is persistent. And now we're hearing talk of raising interest rates. That's why I use the term rug pull, because I truly feel, especially as silver stackers, we are having that feeling like the rug is being pulled out from directly underneath us. According to CBS News, Americans need an extra $11,000 today just to afford the basics. An extra $11,000. Now, I don't know how real that number is, but we're all feeling this. This article says that the typical American household must spend an additional $11,000 annually just to make the same standard of living they enjoyed in January of 2021, right before inflation soared to 40-year highs. And such figures underscore the financial squeeze many families continue to face, even as the rate of U.S. inflation recedes. We're told it recedes, and the economy, by many measures, remains strong, with jobless rates at a 2-decade low. The analysis tells us that even for you and I in the trenches, as regular people, even beyond these numbers and these statistics, the go-to for inflation, in my mind, is always the standard of a gallon of milk. And as we see that gallon of milk, still the price continues to go up and up, that tells us that is really for regular, normal people living life, whether you believe these statistics that we're told in any form of media. When prices are continuing to be persistent and going up, that inflation is persistent, that it's real and it's still here. We see with this bump in gold and soon to be a bump in silver. I'm confident that silver always shows that it follows gold. It is definitely going to follow, and it might not be tomorrow, but it's coming. Look back at what was that? About 8 years ago, when gold had that nice bump. Silver did follow. It took a bit, but it followed. Now, with all of this going on, with talk of rate hikes and inflation continuing, the real pain that we feel is seen in credit card debt. I mean, that shows that regular, everyday people are turning, they're in desperation, to credit cards. Nobody wants to live off credit cards, but I'm certain you've seen this map online. It's very common. It's a map of a credit card delinquency, and it shows state by state which states have the greatest delinquency, and those states, the main ones are down south: Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Those southern states are being hit the most, and those are people who, since before the pandemic, but certainly after the pandemic, the unemployment rate and the opportunity for employment has completely shifted, right? I mean, we've seen people, and we've heard people talk about jobs coming in, but really it's a struggle for everyone. And I see it just even in our silver stacking community. I hear and I read in the comments of people saying even as silver has been stagnant for quite some time, that we struggle even to accumulate a few ounces. So it really hits us and it hits everyone. The hardest part that I find looking at employment is the numbers change all the time, right? Numbers will come out in 1 month, and then the following month they're changed, and it's hard to determine like which is really true, right? NBC News, an article from NBC News says that the U.S. added 275,000 jobs in February, more than expected. That sounds great, but the unemployment rate climbs. This is like the dichotomy that we hear. It sounds like a positive report, but it still doesn't impact the real underlying issue of unemployment. This article says the rate of workers quitting or being laid off has stalled, but hiring rates haven't fallen as much as expected in February. 3 years ago, the U.S. economy went through an unprecedented upheaval as millions of workers left low-paying jobs for more promising ones. We all remember this. At the same time, many white-collar workers cemented themselves into remote or at least hybrid positions that gave them more flexibility. And remember, this was called the Great Resignation. We are still seeing the impacts of this change in the labor force. We see with commercial real estate struggling, carrying all this debt with these empty buildings of people either working remote or hybrid. That's continuing today, and that all drains and puts pressure on the economy. Fast forward to today, and the situation looks like a mirror image, economists say. Specifically, on average, few workers are leaving their jobs, though they still do not face the prospect of imminent layoffs. At the same time, the rate of hiring has dropped significantly. Some economists have begun calling it the Great Stay. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the U.S. economy added 275,000 jobs in February. Again, this is from NBC News, and that's up from a revised 229,000 in January and above the 198,000 expected by economists. The solid job growth data, combined with an unemployment rate that at 3.9% is usually a sign of a healthy labor market, is colliding with other more worrisome trends. And the trends are really what we are seeing in everyday life, with inflation being persistent and the U.S. dollar weakening and weakening. This is from Tech Startups. It says that 40% of U.S. dollars in existence, 40% of U.S. dollars in existence were printed in the last 12 months. This is how we experience turning on the printing presses. And we've all been hearing reports about the growing debt, and the idea of turning on the printing presses really makes us turn to this silver, like what I'm holding in my hand. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a regular guy that stacks silver. But when I hear reports like this and hear talk of turning on the presses and 40% of the actual paper currency being printed in the last 12 months, that tells me that I want my wealth to be in metals. I want my wealth to be something that I hold in my hand, and that's why I continue to stack rounds. And with the drop in premiums of American Silver Eagles, I continue to pick up American Silver Eagles. These, of course, that I'm holding here, this is not something suggested for stacking. These are reverse proofs. They're very expensive, but they're just beautiful, and I love picking them up anyway. But that's why I continue to go all in on stacking, because the real shocking part of inflation, and this speaks to all of us that take in our information from YouTube like I do. I'm just like everyone else. I like getting my information from regular, everyday people. I don't like listening to talking heads on mainstream media. But the shocking part of this continued inflation, the shocking part of the massive credit card debt, the shocking part of unemployment and the weakening dollar is a revitalization. I'm confident you've noticed this. A revitalization of that old Reaganomics narrative of trickle-down economics. And I'm hearing this often lately of people saying, especially in an election year, when we hear a lot of how can we resolve this issue of this massive debt, and the arguments start over our tax system. We're hearing this old callback to that narrative of trickle-down economics, and a lot of people are actually reaching back to that idea. Now, I lived through Reaganomics, and I know many of you lived through Reaganomics. If you haven't, I'll just give you a quick 2-sentence explanation. The idea is that you give the wealthy people, the 1%, the wealthy people of this country, you give them the money, and that money trickles down to everyday people. It doesn't work. It didn't work in the Reagan era, and it's never worked in the history of this planet. Wealthy people, rich people, hold on to their wealth, period. That's no surprise to anyone. Wealthy people, that's what they do. They hold on to their wealth. They don't just like on their own decide to distribute that wealth. And along with this theory of trickle-down economics, along with that is the idea that wealthy people, well, they create businesses and they create corporations and therefore they make jobs. Well, we live in a globalized economy. So any corporation in the United States, anyone who's an entrepreneur, is going to need to manufacture overseas. They have to. That's the only way they can survive. They must. And China no longer offers that cheap workforce that she used to offer. That workforce, they're now middle-class people that don't want to work in factories anymore. We've seen this play out over the past 2 years. The workforce of China is no longer what it was in the past 2 decades. Now, the factories are in India, they're in other Asian countries that offer workforce that is eager to work in a factory and eager to get out of their rural home and make a better life for themselves, just like what happened to China. So the idea of this, I'm really shocked and surprised to hear this narrative come back. I thought I made it through Reaganomics and I thought I was done with it. So to hear people touting this trickle-down theory that, oh, we need to leave, we need to tax the base of this country. We need to tax the working people and regular everyday people like you and me. We need to increase our own taxes and, assume that the wealth is just going to trickle down to us. Oh, I really hope that it doesn't come to this, because one thing that I've always been drawn to in our silver stacking community is that we are regular people. We work regular jobs and we work hard to stack and even, I'll use the word collect these semi-numismatic coins and, stack our silver, stack our gold, and keep a safe store of wealth, because we know that the dollar is going to continue to weaken. We know that debt is out of control, and we know that we want to have our wealth in our own hands and in a safe place.